Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for 13.10. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream as well. It starts every night, usually around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Typically goes until about midnight Eastern Standard Time. So very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And check out the rest of the content as well. I am going to do an 80 carry tier list, and I might do some other roles as well. So apologize for a little bit of delay here. It was just like the worst time possible just about for doing content. I had a ton of friends and family stuff going on over the weekend, and students were all turning in their final projects. So apologize for taking a little bit on this one, but at least gave me a few more days to play a couple games and just kind of see if my ideas were playing out. So don't have a ton of experience on this patch, but a little bit. But I've definitely been doing some theory crafting. So let's go ahead and get in here, and I'm not going to talk about the patch notes in super depth. I was going to do a separate patch notes video, but it was just taking so long. I figured, you know what, I'll just break it up anyways and just put it on the individual videos. So I'll talk a little bit about support and ADC here, and then I'll go into more depth about the ADC side of it on the ADC tier list video, and then if I do the other roles, and I'll go into it more there. But the quick version is that I think they are emphasizing more lane dominance, so they're making it tougher on the vision game. The nerfs to sweeper were absolutely brutal, so it's a lot easier to kind of keep vision up, and that means that you can dominate lane harder, and it's less likely you're going to get ganked. So, you know, stuff like Jen, potentially Caitlyn if she's played well, Sona, a lot of these kind of lane dominant champions are going to be pretty strong right now. And I think that, like, Xayah is going to be pretty good as well. I don't remember the exact win rate on her, but I think any champion that does really well with quick blades, once the meta settles out and people finally start buying the right items, I think quick blade champions are going to be pretty good. So right now it's Jhin. People are looking at Kog'Maw. Xayah's win rate is okay. I mean, the big thing there is I think she's just really hard to play, and I think people probably aren't, everyone's not building her correctly. Yeah, everyone's getting the Stormrazor, and that was one thing that I wanted to mention. It's like Stormrazor, I mean, I guess it does have an okay win rate here, but it just feels like it's kind of a bait to me. I was talking about this on stream the other day with people, and I was like, why is everybody buying Stormrazor? And somebody said that it was like a 2,700 gold item or 2,800 gold item. And I was like, what, really? I don't remember that. And it's not. It's 3,000. So, sorry for people that are watching. I kind of just went along with that, just assumed that was accurate. But maybe they were looking at a past patch note or something. Or maybe these are wrong, and in-game it is 2,700. But as it is, it's about 100% efficient, which is, like, not great, but okay. And it does have the scaling energized bolt, so it's 65% of your total AD. And your bonus magic damage, if you get any, which a lot of ADCs are not going to be getting that directly. Some are going to be doing proc damage if they get Gensu's a lot, but they're probably not going to be building a lot of AP most of the time. So it's really just like 65% AD scaling. And like, that's pretty good, you know, later on. If you have 200 AD, then you're going to be hitting for 155. So that's better than something like Rapid Fire and Static Shiv. Like, Static Shiv is 60 to 170. I think Rapid Fire is somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's going to come online and do more proc damage earlier. I guess that movement speed does help you potentially escape ganks a little bit better. So it's all right. I think a lot of it has to do with the build path as well, that it still builds out of Noon Quiver, which is very friendly on your back timings with a bunch of long swords, and it's got Chase Shard, which now does flat AD and has proc damage. So it's a much friendlier build path than, you know, rushing something like Gale Force now, which is going to have that BF sword, which I've always talked about for years and years, just being an obnoxious item because it's 1,300 you have to have on your back. So it requires a very specific back timing. I personally thought that BT was going to be better because it's 126% efficient. So it's a lot. You get a lot of stats off of this bad boy. It's 65 AD and 18% lifesteal, which is really good in the laning phase. And then eventually you get plus 40 AD in the late game, which is quite strong. Now that doesn't really start scaling. It doesn't jump from 10 to 15 extra AD until like level 13 or 14. So it takes a while for that to kick in, but nevertheless, I thought some people were going to be building this. It's only 200 more gold than Storm Razor and has 10 more AD. It doesn't have the attack speed on it, and it has lifesteal, but it doesn't have the proc damage. But a lot of people seem to like Storm Razor. Again, I think once people realize just how strong Quick Blades are, you might see more of that. Xayah, I think, is going to be really good because her E, when you rip all the feathers back, scales with your crit strike anyways to do extra damage, and then this is going to do even more damage off of that. So, like I said, I won't spend too long on ADCs, but it's on this video, but it is important to kind of just understand how the ADC meta might shape up, and sometimes it might take people a few patches to figure it out. But it is actually looking somewhat diverse right now. Like, you've got Jhin, who's, a Gale Force burst, early bully type of champ. You've got Kog'Maw, who's kind of a late game scaling champ, who's getting picked a lot at 12%, and they build different items. Obviously, he's the Gensu on hit build. He's like the Gale Force, crit Storm Razor type of build. You've got Lucian, who's kind of the duelist, who I assume is going to be using Quick Blades, like Essence Quick Blades or something. Actually, what the hell? They still like Storm Razor on him too? Maybe there's just something I don't understand about Storm Razor. It's like Gale Force does have the same win rate. Maybe the build path it really is just the build path, I guess, just feeling a lot friendlier. But, Gale Force is really good on him, but man, Quick Blades is good too. So, it looks pretty diverse right now, which means there'd probably be a pretty decent diversity of supports that can be pretty good as well. So, overall, I think that's a win. I know a lot of people have been complaining about this patch and like ADCs and stuff, but look at this. This is like of the highest pick ban influence. These are all very different types of champions. Karthus is kind of just a troll outlier with less than a 2% pick rate. But Xayah, that's team fighting, with Xayah and Misfortune, crit stuff. Twitch is kind of sneaky team fighting. Neela's melee. Lucian's close range duelist. Kog'Maw's hyperscaler Jhin. All of these have higher than a, close to a 52+% win rate. So I think that's a pretty healthy meta right there as far as ADCs go. And there's quite a few. There's 5 that are 15% or higher pick rate as well. And then you've got Cog clocking in at 12. So that's really good. Usually with ADCs, there's 2 that are 30% pick rate and all the rest of them aren't. So pretty good diverse meta. So a lot of supports can work on that. And again, I won't spend too much longer on this, but that's all I'll talk about for the ADCs for now, and again, we'll go into it more on the ADC tier list. But as far as supports and support item goes, I think the Enchanter items probably ended up being the best, although I think Tank's got some pretty good items as well. I haven't seen a lot of people building Abyssal Mask, but this thing's actually quite good now. I think it's dropped down to 2,400 gold, so it's a little bit more expensive than some of the other tank items. It's got a little bit less health, but it has 60 flat magic resist, and it still has the really good aura. So it is sort of situational. If your team has a lot of magic damage and their team has a lot of magic damage, then being able to reduce enemy magic resist is good. And don't forget, there are quite a few ADCs right now. It is diverse like we just talked about, but there's a decent amount of them that do have some magic damage in their kits because, they increase the proc damage on Storm Razor is magic, I'm pretty sure. Gensu is, that's magic damage. Gensu's magic damage. Static Shiv's magic damage. Hurricane Bolts do extra magic damage now. So they've really tried to diversify a lot of ADCs away from just strictly physical damage and armor. So that means that not only are your mages going to benefit, but potentially your ADCs are going to get a little benefit as well by reducing the magic resist on people. So it's effectively increasing the damage on quite a bit of your team. And there's not a lot of champions that do this currently, but if you get Even Shroud with this, that would amplify it even more. I think that could potentially be a decent build on something like a Maokai or an Amumu that has pretty good base magic damage that still wants to be a little tanky. You could maybe consider Abyssal Mask as a support option instead of something like Demonic. Demonic's obviously going to do higher individual damage, but it's way more expensive. And those champs don't have amazing AP ratios. They're okay, so you don't get as much benefit out of the flat, whatever it is, 60 AP on those champs. I feel like you'd much rather have magic resistance in a lot of matchups and health. And like I said before, with a lot of ADCs also doing decent magic damage, and magic resistance is also going to be a little bit more valuable. So you're not seeing this a lot, But I think on tank champions, this should be, in consideration as second or third item more often than it is. Okay, Art and Sensor got dropped back down to the classic 2100 gold, and they finally made it 2 items. This is fantastic. One of the most annoying things for this item in recent times, ever since they sort of reworked it in season, I think it was 8 or 9 or whenever it was, then it built out of like 2 amp tomes and a forbidden idol, and it didn't have ability haste anymore. So I've been saying they need to just make it like 2 legendary items that build into this item, or 2 whatever components. 2-piece item. And that's what they finally did by doing Forbidden Idol, Aether Wisp. This way you don't have to hold 2 amp tomes in your inventory, because your inventory slots are really slim as support. You got to carry around wards, you got your boots, you got your warding item. You just have all kinds of different things that you want to be holding in your inventory. Any potions. So it's really nice that they did this. So I think this is definitely moving in the right direction. Lower cost is a big deal as well. So that means champions that scale with items are going to do better now, because, for the last couple of years, you've only been able to really get 2.5 items as support most of the time, because they increased the price on all of them with the Mythic introduction. Everything was like 2,500 gold, sometimes even more, but that was like the benchmark was 2,500 for most like support items, or in that ballpark. Whereas historically, they've been a lot closer to 2,100. And since supports don't get that much money anyways, that's a big deal. Especially because years ago, they lowered the gold that you got off the support item. With things like Ancient Coin, you used to be able to get like 2,000 gold off of that. Back in the good old days of like Season 8, when you got to get like 3 items as a support, and there were like, 15 viable support items or whatever. So it looks like they're moving back in that direction where you can actually complete 3 items again in more games. And I think that's really good for the game, because one of the historical like complaints of supports is you don't have any money, right? And so it just feels like sometimes you can't really influence the game, or you don't have enough like fun or interesting decisions as far as like your itemization and your theory crafting go, because you just get less items, 1 or 2 less items than a lot of the carries do in many games. So if they let you get 3 items again, I think that's perfect. Then you're still going to have a control ward slot. At the end, you're going to have a full inventory around, 30 minutes or something, 25 to 30 minutes in a lot of games. And it's just going to feel like you have more choices, and it's just going to be a better experience for supports, and it's going to allow them to contribute a little bit more in the game. And the way that they're doing it is just by nerfing the base stats on things and then lowering the cost, but then doubling down and emphasizing the unique identity of those auras and those actives on those items. And that's the perfect way to do it. That keeps the other roles from poaching these items, like the junglers, top laners, mids, stops them from buying it, because the, greedy part of it, the individual stats are garbage, but then it allows them to do much more power in the team fight or with the uniqueness of the item. So I love it. I think Freak's done a great job when he's gone over there. I know he's behind a lot of this, or I'm pretty sure he is. I think he's definitely, it's not the game was in a horrible place, but I really like his intent and kind of where he's moving this. So I know this patch has gotten some critiques, but I think it looks really good in theory. Maybe the numbers are a little off on some things, but I like the direction. So ability power is down a lot, so that's rough, losing 25 ability power. Bonus healing and shielding is the same. You do get 5% movement speed, so that's good. And, that's a big problem that I've talked about as well with enchanters is you got to figure out a way to like make them relevant and help people out without, again, making it something that other roles would want to poach. And I think movement speed is a good way of doing that, because it allows them to reposition, ward better, maybe roam better. They're still not going to be as good as tanks at those things, but this is just a different kind of like scaling, where if they get caught, they die. But now, if you just move correctly, you're going to be able to dodge more stuff. Express more skill with your movement speed, which is good. I wish they would give them ability haste on these items. Hi, Rory, what are you doing? Are you looking for Big Poe? Okay, I think it's in there in your clubhouse in the bonus room. I think that's where you left it last night. Did you have a fun day at school? Okay, good. So I wish they put ability haste on there. I guess, that's the other way that historically enchanters have been able to kind of keep up with tanks as they had more ability haste. They could just cast more abilities. So traditionally, the tank supports just had really good, like, all in, use all your abilities, but they had really long cooldowns. So you get like one or maybe two sets of abilities per team fight. But like the enchanters got to cast, maybe one additional ability per fight because they had ability haste on their abilities. So that's changed up in recent years. Won't go too far into that. I wish they put it back on this item, but I do like that they're putting more power into, again, the unique passive here. So now it's doing 15 to 30% attack speed, and it's doing 15 to 30 on hit damage, that's quite a lot more than it used to be. It was like 5, I think. It's like 5 to 30. Yeah, 5 to 20. So that's a lot. So I really like that. It's good. It makes the item a lot worse if you're not in a big team fight, but makes it a lot better if you are. I think that's a good balancing decision there. So a lot of enchanters are going to be looking at this item again, second or third, especially if you have multiple on-hit champs on your team. Putrefire's going down. It's losing a little bit of ability haste. That's fine. I mean, the big thing with this item is it's dealing damage is bad. I wish they would move it back to healing or shielding. I guess it was too good with like Font of Life. They should really fix Font anyways. But they should try to fix Font anyways, just so it doesn't have as many interactions with stuff like Ardent Censer and Chemtech Putrefier and Helia, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's very difficult to balance those items around that rune, because that rune is so strong with them. But okay, I guess that's fine. It's still like very niche. I don't think you're going to get this all the time unless they just have like extreme healing, especially because people aren't buying stuff like BT or Shield Bow anymore. So it's okay. Echoes of Helia. Alright, so this is the big new one, and a lot of people have been tripping out saying this is like super OP, and there's all kinds of all caps videos on this, and I kind of was drinking the Kool-Aid, and I was trying out some stuff with it, like Ashe support, like, oh my god, you slow them all the time, and that's going to trigger Font, and then when people auto-attack them, then that's going to like keep triggering Helia. Like, it's okay. Like, it is a good item, but it's not like, I don't think it's insane. It's good on some champions, but it's not like every champion is going to run this. A lot of enchanters do want this. Basically, what it does is, whenever you deal damage to someone, you stack up a couple of shards, 1 shard per instance of damage, and then whenever you heal or shield somebody, it consumes that shard, both shards, and it will deal a flat amount of health. So 2 shards is the same as 1 shard on the healing, but it could do double damage, 30 to 200 damage. I feel like that's really on the strong side. So 2 things about this item if it does get nerfed. 1, it needs an internal cooldown. At least per champion. Like Mandate, where you can't trigger it on the same champion more than once every, 6 seconds. That's what Mandate is. So I think that would help out a lot. And if they need to readjust and make it a slightly bigger heal, okay. And 2, I just think the damage is too high. Like 200 damage, you could do 400 damage off of this later in the game. So yeah, it is good. You still are going to be a little bit on the squishy side. It does have relatively high AP, because when you combine it with the mana regeneration on this item, and typically you're going to be getting Frostfang with this, I think it ends up going to like 55 or 60 AP. So it is fairly high. So this is a good item, and this is what's kind of propelling Janna and Sona up to S tier, and Annie to an extent as well. So it is very good. I just don't know if it's like all caps, oh my god, like hot fix this kind of OP, but it is fairly strong. I think enchanters in general, especially at lower elo brackets, need to be stronger than tanks, because if they ever want to see them in pro play, and I'm not sure if everyone wants to see enchanters in pro play, but I think a lot of pro players don't like enchanters. But tanks just naturally have so many advantages over enchanters that you just have to make their numbers better. Like, significantly better for people to want to play enchanters. Because not being able to engage is a huge detriment, especially in higher level games. It just puts a lot of extra strategic constraints on your team. Other people have to heavily draft engage. It can be a real problem. And then you have a hard time warding as well, because you can't really go by yourself with a lot of enchanters. There are some exceptions like Janna, but it's difficult to go by yourself, or you could get picked off. You just have really low base stats in general, so if you just get hit by a bunch of, AoE or CC or whatever, you can get blown up pretty easily. So there's just a lot of perks of being a tank, just baseline. So I think you have to make the scaling better. So, anyways, I think Helios kind of has the right idea. I don't know why they didn't just bring back like old Athenes and just adjust the stats on it. That's kind of what this is. But old Athenes, you know, the amount that you healed was based on the amount of damage that you did. So this is not. Like, you could do a 5 damage tick off of an Amumu W, and it's going to give you a stack of the shard. So I think that's a little weird. But anyways, okay, even Shroud's going down a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of free on even Shroud, and it builds out of a couple of different items, but this is situational. Like on other champs that have damage amplification, or if your team just really needs like damage amp, this can be good. So like a Mumu, Maokai, things like that, it could be strong. Maybe you see this also on like Leona. This is basically the offensive version of a like a good, just solid tank item if you don't want Locket for like the AoE shield defense. Okay, Mandate also got changed. This is another one that's gonna blow up or like increase the power level of a lot of enchanters. Is that it's no longer a mythic, and they took away the health and gave it 15 more AP, which is a really good trade if you're something like a Janna or a Sona, or to someone else who can play pretty far back. Nami. I think they nerfed the damage on it a little bit, dealing 90 to 150. They're changing that to 70 to 150, and the baseline was 45 to 75, 35 to 75. So they're kind of doing the opposite of what I mentioned here, so I don't know exactly how I feel about that. Where they're giving it higher base stats, but they're lowering the unique passive. But I think they are clarifying that the identity is supposed to, you know, be for enchanters. I don't think a lot of other lanes are going to poach this anyways. So I think that's pretty good. I don't know about the upfront damage even. I would like to see him just stack all of that on the back end proc. But anyways, so that's going to be a pretty good like second item, or like you'll build it in your first couple of items thing. Okay, Knight's Vow is getting armor on it, which is really good. It hasn't had armor. People were asking about that on stream the other day. It used to have armor, and they took it away years ago. So it's a little bit cheaper, that 2,200 price range, a little bit less health, a little bit more armor, ability haste, and then 10% of pre-mitigation damage they take. I think it was pre-mitigation. Oh, it's changed. What does that mean? So, you're taking more damage, I guess, if you get this as a support. So, if something was going to do 100 damage, I don't know if this is better or worse, and like 50% of it was going to be reduced. So, previously, you would redirect 10 damage, and then they would take their damage. So, you take 10, and then they get 50% reduced. They take 45. So, it gets reduced to 90, cut in half, 45. So when it was post-mitigation, then it would get mitigated down to 50 first, and then you would take 5, and they would take 5. Okay, so it's basically the same thing for them. I think mathematically, obviously, that's shaky napkin math there, but I think it's the same for the damage to them, but you personally are going to take more of the damage. So still good, but is a nerf. I think to them, or to the item a little bit, but I really like the trading out 50 health for 25 armor effectively and a little bit of ability haste. That's really nice. So you're going to be mitigating. I guess it comes at you as true damage, but it's a similar item. I think it's going to be better, and I think that's something that you'll still get a little bit better because of the armor in a lot of matchups. Locket is basically the same, just gold cost lowered, I believe. Let me see. Actually, they're increasing the shield a little bit, so that's pretty nice. Mikhail's still going to be very situational. They got rid of the magic resistance. They're just putting flat health on it. They got rid of all the ability haste, so that kind of sucks. Like, enchanters really want ability haste, but it's still quite a powerful ability. It's got a little bit more heal on it, especially later in the game, but losing the ability haste feels really bad. So I would consider this probably a significant nerf. But it is going to be better against AD teams that happen to have a lot of CC, which is kind of rare, but does happen. Moonstone, they're changing this, but like you're pretty much always going to get Helia. Like almost no champion is going to get Moonstone over Helia, I don't think, except for maybe like Soraka, just because she has such an extremely low cooldown heal. So yeah, basically it's just every time you do this, you effectively do somewhere between 20 and 30% extra plus healing and shielding. Pretty much. It just bounces to a nearby ally instead, but there's no like interesting interactions here. It's just basically plus healing and shielding. So it's a little underwhelming. I don't know. This item has always just been a little weird and difficult to balance. Radiant Virtue. Haven't seen a lot of people getting this. They are dropping the cost by 500. The health is down a little bit. The ability haste going down by 10 is not fantastic. They did nerf the heal pretty significantly, 2.5% of your max health. I think it was 3% of your max health. So it still could be good in some situations for sure. 500 gold is very cheap. So I think we'll still see it, but I think it'll be maybe a bit more situational. They removed the ability haste on redemption too. So again, I feel like that's really bad. They're just taking like all ability haste off of enchanter items, it feels like. Quite a few of them. And then you are getting a little bit of a bigger heal. But, you know, this is competing with Helia and Mandate early, and I just think that, and like Ardent Censer and Staff of Flowing Water, and I just think that's what most people are going to get, like, some version of those 3 items now. Because now, like, if you're not going to have ability haste anyways, you might as well just do Ardent Censer or Staff. It's going to do a lot more, like, guaranteed power in team fights. So, I mean, that was one of the main draws. You know, obviously the Redemption and Mikhail's, they have good actives, but they also have ability haste, and that was something that was really nice that enchanters really like, but now they don't, so it makes them less competitive versus those other items. Okay, you're losing 5 ability power on Shirelia's, but it's going down in cost by 200. That's a fair trade. And then I think you're getting a little bit, 20% less bonus movement speed on your just individual shield. So this will matter a little bit, but I think overall that's at least power neutral, possibly even a little bit stronger, just because you're getting the cost down. But it is competing with something like Helia for a lot of champions now. Staff Flowing Water also going down. This one's only losing 15 ability power instead of 25, so that's good. It's getting movement speed, and then rapids, I think, is the same. No, it's giving you a little bit more, 30 to 45 ability power and 20 ability haste. Okay. And this is going to be a little bit better, again, for some ADCs marginally, because with those items, because they're getting some kind of like AP ratios now on just weird little things, right? Like Callista got like a 0.2 on her Rend. So that's not like a game-breaking amount, you know, of stuff, but now that more and more things are getting AP ratios, including a lot of like AD items, then the extra AP doesn't feel as bad for your ADC partner in a lot of cases. Watchful Wordstone, they just basically gutted this item. Like, almost no support's going to pay 2,300. Like, that is absurd. That's a full support item. Like, you could have Ardent Censer instead of this thing. Like, yes, control wards are good, but I just don't think... It was already extremely rare to buy this item, so I don't know why they're... Like, how much gold do you think supports have late game for these, like, gold sinks? You can't even complete a third item a lot of times. Anyway, Zeke's armor's up a little bit. Ability haste is down. And everything else is the same. It's okay. I think situationally, if you want more damage on like a fed ADC that has like a Gensu's and can double proc this convergence on hit, then it could be pretty good, but I think it's going to get overshadowed by other things like Knight's Vow. Okay, so let's talk about the tier list itself. Now that we spent 30 minutes talking about the items, what does all this mean? That was a little bit longer than I was expecting, so sorry about that, but we are trying to squeeze the passions in here too. We'll make sure we get it done in under an hour. Okay, so I still think Rakan is going to be on top. Surprise! Right? Now, I could see an argument against this time. I think last patch he was so far ahead. But this time, because a lot of the enchanters got some new toys, I think that it's a bit more of a conversation who's on top. I would not, think that it was terribly wrong if someone else put Janna or Sona on top here either. We'll talk about them in a second. But I do think that Rakan is still going to be very good. His win rate is still high. I don't think it's quite as high as it was. But he's in that unique position where he can just use almost any items. He's so versatile, and there are so many different kinds of builds you can do now. Now, I do think, in my experience, the Shirelias is still the place to go. But as you can see, there are a lot of good options on him, right? We've got Shirelias is at 54%, Helia's 54%, Radiant is close to 54%, and then Even Shroud is close to 54%. It's actually almost 55%. So that's like 4 different items with very different strategic purposes that you could get on Rakan, right? If your team needs a little bit more damage and you need a little bit more personal protection because they have a lot of lockdown CC or you're going to be getting hit by a lot of AoE stuff, then you could go for something like Even Shroud or Radiant. And, that happens sometimes, right? Because Rakan has to go in and shield. You have to get close to people. So, if they have something like a Wukong or a, Malphite ult or a Ziggs bomb, like there are a lot of things when you're going in trying to protect somebody that you potentially could get hit by in some team fights. So having the ability to get that 30 armor, 30 magic resist, and a little bit more health on some items is good. And then Radiant lets you catch up. If your team just got blasted a little bit, you could even combine that with something like a Redemption potentially. And then Even Shroud, like I said before, you can kind of double down and help your team do a lot more damage if you're a bit weak on the damage side. You could combine that, like I said earlier, with something like Abyssal Mask if you want. And then you have the two that are probably going to be most probable in a lot of games. You've got Shirelia's Classic. This thing, you don't see the stats on it very much. It's just like you inspired X number of people, but you don't see numbers on it like Helia. You might see, you dealt 3,000 damage and healed for 1,000 on it. You don't see that on Shirelia's, but the movement speed, it just makes or breaks so many situations. Like that can be the difference between your ADC being able to kite out some divers and dying, right? Or it could be the difference between you have a really good opportunity to make a huge engage, you pop this, you go in, your team can follow up, you just win the game off of that. Versus if you didn't have this, maybe they get away. So those kinds of edge situations happen a lot. And it's something that people really don't appreciate, I think, if you don't play Rakan a lot. And I've even tried a ton of these other items. I've tried almost everything on Rakan, obviously, because I play him so much. And that is something that it's one of those you just kind of have to feel it because it doesn't show up on the stats card. I know it's not everybody's favorite. But the fact that Rakan can go so far ahead with his R because he gets so much movement speed to find engages, but the big risk is your team can't get there a lot of times to follow up on the good engages. That's a lot of what makes this item particularly good on Rakan. And the fact that his shield can trigger it twice. So you shield somebody, and then you run along with the motivate, you wait a few seconds, and you shield them again. The fact that you have 2 short-term shields also helps you rotate around the map with your team pretty quickly. So he just kind of has a lot of low-key advantages with this item that many other champs don't have. So that's strong. Now Echoes is going to be pretty good on him as well. He does scale pretty well with AP, so that's nice. And then a lot of fights you're going to be able to trigger these stacks, on multiple champions pretty quickly, right? You go in, you knock up 2 people, you're going to get 2 stacks. And then you run around with your R, you tag a bunch of people, you get stacks. You hit your Q, you're going to get stacks. And if you just run Font on him, which is really easy to do, right? Because you're running Guardian most of the time anyways, then you're going to be, triggering this a lot. So, and the fact that he can run this as an engaged champion, again, is fairly unique because a lot of engaged champions, you're going to be too squishy, right? If you're playing Leona or Nautilus, you probably can't run Echoes. But because Rakan, in a lot of situations, can go in, get the engage, and then get back out with his E, that means he can run enchanter items sometimes. Now, you're going to be squishier. Like I talked about before, you got to be careful which comp you're doing this into. But if they don't have a lot of lockdown CC, the Echoes can be a fantastic choice. And it builds out of similar items to Shirelius, you can just get Bandle Glass Mirror and a Ruby Crystal, and then just kind of see how the game's going, right? If there's, you're going to need a bit more team fight strength, a little bit more healing, whatever. Maybe go Echoes if you already have a lot of dive. You got a Hecarim on your team, you got a Kaisa, something like that. Maybe you don't need the Shirelius for the movement speed, although it's really good with Hecarim. But y'all know what I'm talking about. If you don't need that movement speed, if you just rather have just more damage and more healing, then Echoes can be a pretty good choice. So he's got some good options here. And then second item, lots of great options as well. Now you can actually get Mandate, which historically is also very good on Rakan because, again, he has great AP scaling and can trigger this pretty easily with a lot of his abilities. So gonna make you very, very squishy, so you got to be careful, right? Because it has no HP on it, no armor or magic resist, but it's a good option. You still got the classic Knight's Vow. You want the maximum personal protection, on your ally. The Knight's Vow can help you do that. Redemption, people are still getting it. Losing the ability haste kind of sucks. Rakan really, really wants ability haste because he has such a powerful engage, and his normal abilities aren't quite a long cooldown for most enchanters. Like, I think his W ends up at like 12 seconds, and his E, I believe, is also around 12 seconds. So really powerful abilities, but long cooldowns relative to many other enchanters, so you really want the ability haste. So this doesn't have that, but especially if you want to go with Radiant, then that can help you stabilize immediately when you go in. It's got that AoE healing, then you can throw down Redemption as well. Great if you just want the maximum kind of team fighting power, and especially if you don't have a lot of healing on your team, which again, a lot of those items, the Shield Bow, the Bloodthirster, all that stuff, is kind of a little more niche right now. Not everyone's getting it, so it's less likely the enemy team's going to get a lot of Grievous Wounds in many matchups, and if they don't have that, then this can be a really good option. So, and his personal shield is pretty good too. It's on a 1.4 ratio, and I think it's a 300 base shield once you get it maxed out. So, good option on him as well. People are still getting Zeke's. I'm a little underwhelmed by Zeke's, but maybe this is better than I think it is. Again, it is very good if you have a Gensu user that can double proc this, or a Hurricane user that can proc it on all the Hurricane bolts. Like, that is quite good. So you can kind of feel it out and see where the game's going. If you really want to go all in on your AD carry or someone else who does a lot of like attack speed on hit damage stuff, then Master Yi, something like that, then that can be pretty good. So Rakan, versatile as always, really good in a lot of situations. He's just so good at vision, as I always talk about before. He's versatile. He's extremely good at vision. He's very good at dealing with ganks. He's reasonable for an engaged champ at dealing with poke. Yes, it is still kind of a problem, but it's less of a problem on Rakan than it is like a Nautilus and a Leona, because at least he has a refillable shield with his passive, and he has the Q to help heal him up and heal his ally up through some of that poke early on. So I think all of these are good. Now, I will say that his matchup into Janna can be quite rough. I think into Sona, it's okay, but Janna is very good right now and becoming somewhat popular. So if she gets even more popular, you might consider a Janna ban. You can play around it. It's just she has two different ways to interrupt you when you're trying to go in, right? She's got the Tornado, which is tricky, and then she also has the R. And she just has really good scaling with her shield, with the extra AD and all that she gives to the AD carry. So that's something to look out for. Bad matchup. That's becoming increasingly popular, so keep an eye on that. But I think he's still it's not unplayable into that matchup. It's just a little bit harder, but he's still very good into most of these other champs. Okay, so speaking of Janna was already quite good before this patch. So she already had a pretty high win rate, 53%. I've been trying out some other enchanters on my Smurf, trying to help my buddy Jason get to platinum. We're just kind of chilling on the diamond account. It's going to reset here pretty soon anyways. I will still play some games on it, but I'm just trying to, help Jason get to platinum, but then also just get a little bit of experience on some of these other champs as well. But she was already pretty good, right? She was like 53%. And something that sets Janna apart from other enchanters, I think, is that she is a lot better at vision control, first of all, than they are, because she can take care of herself. She's naturally going to be relatively fast because she gets extra movement speed off of her W. And that Tornado, along with Glacial Augment, means that she can get away from most champions. If she gets, engaged on, she can just tornado them, run away. Worst case scenario, you have to pop your R and get away. But she can get away from situations like that so much better than something like a Sona, for example, who doesn't have a lot of hard CC. Sona can pop her ult and stun people temporarily, but it's just not nearly the kind of like peeling and escape that Janna offers. And speaking of that, she's extremely good at peeling. So she has a very clear role, which is like, you're not going to touch this backline, right? And with certain ADCs being very strong right now, despite how much people are complaining about ADCs, I think, on this patch and being weaker, they are still very strong, like we saw, near the beginning of this video. So she just really helps protect people. She applies vision quite well for an enchanter. She doesn't have anything that personally checks bushes, like a Lux E. But again, she can just get out of situations. And she can roam really well for a support. Well, I mean, again, not like Leona or Nautilus, but she can get there fast, I should say, with the W. And if she gets intercepted in the river, you're probably going to be okay. Right? So just rolling up, and get actually doing the gank. She's not as brutal as some other ones. But getting there, the safety of getting there is good. And her own personal safety, right? Where she's not going to get engaged on super easily in the lane. She's great at disengaging. All of this just makes her a really safe support and for an enchanter. And she still scales pretty well, right? She gets extra plus healing and shielding off of her E. And I believe it still gives extra AD, right? Yeah, they gain... It's significantly less bonus attack damage than it used to have, but she still gets 15% plus healing and shielding power. And she works really well with Glacial Augment. She's one of the few enchanters that can comfortably run this item. And it just synergizes super well with her kit, just keeps everybody slowed, scales really well with plus healing and shielding. She gets extra plus healing and shielding off of her E. So, she's good. Now, you don't have the Moonstone interaction anymore because she's going Helia, but you're just going to be able to hang out in the back, land some of these autos, hit your tornadoes, all of that, and just, draw out team fights. It's just going to take a while for people to get through all of your stuff and kill anybody, and the longer the fights go, the more Echoes of Helia is going to kick in and start being useful. And then Imperial Mandate is fantastic as well because everything in your kit, just about at least 3 of your abilities, you're going to apply a slow or an immobilize, your Q, your W, and your ult. That does not work with Glacial, but that's fine because to trigger Glacial, you have to immobilize them anyways. So, I guess, it's not going to trigger Mandate. I don't believe if you hit one person with Tornado and Glacial triggers and spreads out and hits 3 other people, I don't think it puts Mandate on all of them. Because it says abilities, not items. I'm not 100% about that. If it does that, that's really good. But it's a great item anyways. And then she's still really good with Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Sensor, all that kind of stuff. And she's okay with these items, not having HP on them. Again, because she's very safe. She shouldn't be getting hit by a lot of stuff. So her early game is still not phenomenal. She does have some good push with her Tornado if you just full charge it on the wave. Just push them in if you're not scared of them engaging and you just want to make sure you get priority. She can do that with the Tornado. You can fish for some hits of your Tornado out of bushes and stuff like that, and if you hit it, great, you get a nice trade. But in general, it's hard to engage. But that's really the only knock on her is she doesn't have great engage, but she has fantastic scaling, fantastic backline protection, and a lot of these ADCs can be quite strong if they get the right amount of protection. So it can be a little frustrating if your team's not making good decisions, if they're not finding good fights. But, if you are, you're definitely going to win the fights because she can navigate the fights themselves better than almost anybody else as long as someone else is able to start the fight and get some engage. Okay. I mean, yeah, you can run up and, W them potentially if you roam, or, you can run up and flank them and, ult and push the whole team back. I mean, yeah, there's, some possibilities there, but realistically, it's hard to start fights. But, honestly, if you get good vision control and you're roaming around, maybe you don't need to start, team fights anyways. Maybe you can just find vulnerabilities, just kill someone in a side lane first or run around with your jungler and catch somebody. There are ways you can probably make action happen on Janna because, again, she is still going to be able to get pretty good vision. She's just not going to be able to, hardcore capitalize on that vision the same way as something like a Blitzcrank can. But nevertheless, she could still be pretty good. Okay. Sona's another one. It shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, everybody knew Sona was going to be really good with Helia. It's like the worst secret out there. um, and it looks like she's just getting that with just early tier Helia. Because, like, Shirelli is still quite good. I imagine the win rate, yeah, is still pretty good on her. But Helia just kind of doubles down on, look, we're going to win this team fight, right? Like, because she just triggers it so easily. Like, her Q hits two different people, and you get empowered auto attacks. You know, your W is shielding a bunch of people. Now, she's not the best Font user, which is a little awkward because Font is so incredibly powerful with Helia. But even without Font, with your W, you're comfortably going to be able to distribute those stacks. So that is interesting. More people are doing Presence of Mind. I didn't do that on her before, but that's actually pretty smart because she does have mana problems early, especially if you're W maxing. Like, it is a lot of mana in the laning phase, and like the healing is pretty garbage at lower levels. So you want to be able to take aggressive trades with her, but then you just almost instantly. So like tier is very good, mana flow is good, but maybe even Presence of Mind might be a little bit better. But yeah, very strong. And then obviously, like your standard aura items, like I mentioned before, she loves that with Ardent Sensor, Staff Flowing Water. Those are both very good on her. So you just have to make sure that you're not getting caught out and blown up because she doesn't have the same kind of peel that Janna does. She does move. She can move fairly quickly with her E. You know, she's got her R, but she's a lot easier to kill than Janna is. A lot easier to engage on, too. So just be aware of that. So she scales, I think, a lot harder in just like clean 5v5 team fights than Janna, but Janna just has a lot more control over people's positioning. So Sona's got the numbers, Janna has kind of those intangibles and positioning. But both great users of Helia. And then finally we've got Annie here. So Annie has been really good, and Annie, I kind of like the current state of Annie, and hopefully they don't nerf her too much, but the fact that she's like an enchanter that also has hard engage and does some damage, I think is a very unique kind of positioning for her. So I really love it. I mean, I don't know if that was Freak's idea to change her E to where you could cast it as a shield on allies or not, but I think that's completely revitalized this champ and opened up a lot of interesting new avenues for her. And you can even flex her as mid. So I don't think she's over the top powerful, but I think she's good. I think that she was initially, but after they nerfed her E on the patch before this one, then, or maybe it was the patch before that recently, they nerfed her E. I think she's in a pretty good spot. So that's a respectable shield. It maxes out at 200 for 3 seconds, and you get a little bit of bonus movement speed. Not a lot, but just a little bit. You know, Janna-esque, I think Milio-esque. And you get the damage reflection, which is kind of weird, but okay. Is good. So she's got the shield. She has, you know, a point-click stun with the Q, which is really good. And then what really makes her unique, I think, is the Tibbers, right? Where you've got this big AoE cooldown, which doesn't usually, especially as support, like, totally one-shot people. But it's got a nice stun on it. It does, like, pretty good upfront damage. And then you can control it and get it to move around and, you know, just do a lot of interesting things. It can protect and soak skill shots. If you're moving it correctly, you can have it just stick and harass someone on the back line. You can have it try to peel your back line. And there are a lot of items that interact with that too. I mean, the most notable one is Rylai's. If you ever wondered why people get Rylai's, it's because the bear triggers it with its aura, so it just can kind of like slow the whole enemy team. So I think she's in an interesting spot. Now people have also started running Glacial, which is kind of cool. I guess pun sort of intended, but that's nice. I think a lot of people were running Aerie, and like Aerie is good with her auto attacks because she has a really long auto attack range. So it's all right, but like you don't really need mana flow banned, I don't think, because you're not just like spamming your abilities on cooldown most of the time. And, like, your E, I believe, is still pretty cheap, right? Yeah, it's 40 mana. But Glacial does give you a little bit more CC after the stun. Then they're going to be slowed. It's going to let Tibber stick to them. Yes, you're going to have Rylai's at some point, but that's a little bit later in the game. But that does give you free boots, which is very nice. Because, you know, she's going to want Sork boots. Those are a bit more expensive in general. And you've got Biscuits for the extra trading early, the extra mana. And then you've got Cosmic Insight, which is really handy for Flash in particular. Flash and Ignite, which uses both of those very well. And then you want to go Font, because anytime you're getting Helia, if you can, on most of these champs, with Sona maybe being the exception there, you want to go Font, because once you apply that slow or that stun to somebody, it puts that debuff over their head for 6 seconds. Whenever somebody auto attacks that person, they get a heal. That heal counts as coming from you, so that triggers Helia. And then the aura on the bear ticking, constantly on all these people is just going to be permanently stacked, pretty much. So that seems like a really, really strong combination. I'm going to have to check that out. But that's something that Annie's kind of needed. I mean, Shirelia's is still quite good, but the fact that Tibbers is constantly, spawning more of this, your E reflecting damage back whenever someone auto attacks the person that has your shield is also going to put a stack on them, I'm pretty sure. So very, very strong interaction with Annie. And then Rylai's is still the second most popular because you get the slow, but I don't know, man. Mandate is also pretty good. You could go, if you have enough gold, you could go Rylai's, then Mandate. But yeah, both those items seem really good. So she plays really nice with these items, and again, she's great because she's Enchanter-esque. She's got the shield, but she can also engage with Tibbers, and she has, some pretty respectable damage. Not as high as some of the AP threats out there, but, pretty good. So, unique, versatile champ. I really like Annie being an option out there. Okay, I know we just have about 9 minutes left. Milio, and that's who this is. This chart thing doesn't have a Milio because they just stopped updating it, but I'm not going to go through and mess with that. Oh, let me put it in presentation mode too. Sorry about the white screen there. I know it's annoying if you're watching it from your phone, especially late at night. I've really liked doing dark mode and stuff like that. Anti-blue light stuff. This feels a lot easier on my eyes. Anyways, so Milio is still pretty good. I wasn't a huge believer in this champ, but to be honest, I do lose a lot of games against him, and maybe I need to try him out a little bit more. He is perhaps a little bit stronger than I thought. I mean, a big thing is you can stack these shields, so it's it does have a longer cooldown than a lot of the other shields out there. Lulu's, I think, is 8-second shield. Janna's is gets down to 10, and even less if you're hitting CC, which reduces the cooldown on it. But the fact that you can trigger both of them at once just gives him pretty nice burst potential. So you can basically burst 280 shield and burst 50% movement speed on somebody. So that's really, really good if you have somebody that you just desperately want to get in there, or if you just want to protect somebody from just a huge blast. Now I will say, Rakan can also shield for this much, but he doesn't give the movement speed by default. Now, if you have Shirelia's, then each person you shield can, get some movement speed. In theory, this guy also gets Shirelia's. But it is the fact that you can get that super speed if you want on somebody, right, of the 50% movement speed is something that maybe I really didn't appreciate early on. But I mean, his big claim to fame is going airy and then putting W in lane on some of these ranged champions that can dominate, because airy just ticks on this over and over and over again because it keeps checking. So it just keeps reapplying airy when you have this on somebody. And that interaction is just so incredibly powerful. They get 2 or 3 shields off of this, which in the early game is just absolutely tremendous. And then late game, the attack range is okay. You do get the heal, but again, it's really just especially in the early game, it's the airy spam off of this that's so incredibly powerful. And then your Q is pretty nice. It is knockback. It's kind of like a Janna tornado, sort of. Not quite the same, but it does push them back. It does damage, and it can slow them. So if you hit this consistently, it's pretty good wave clear too. If you hit this consistently, it can do quite a bit of damage. And then your R is okay. It does get rid of all immobilizations. It does heal for an okay amount, and it gives tenacity. So if you're against a lot of CC, it can be good. But Milio's, main claim to fame is just early game bullying with the W, area abuse, and then just your Q being pretty long range, like good wave clear, good harass. The fact that it has that knockback stun basically and then slows them by quite a lot as well makes it really easy for your AD carry to hit stuff on them, like Jen W, Caitlyn Q, all that kind of stuff. So he pairs really well with kind of this bully, push and bully play style that's pretty good with a lot of popular ADCs right now. And I guess, yeah, he just really likes the Ardent Sensor stuff. I suppose, or the Forbidden Idol items, Ardent Sensor, Staff Flowing Water, all that kind of stuff. Now, he, sort of like Janna, I imagine, and again, I haven't played him a ton. I played him a little bit, but he can probably get away from a lot of stuff with his W, or with his Q, rather, if something's chasing him. If he's trying to ward, and then his E, he could pop double E on himself and get, 50% movement speed. So, kind of Karma-esque in the sense that you do have pretty good movement speed. You probably can, rotate and ward a lot better than many enchanters. So I could definitely see an argument for him being S tier. I think it requires a little bit more initiative. Like, you have to hard stomp the lane, I think, versus like Janna and Sona are just going to be better by default in team fights, I think, late game. I think they have more tools and just more scaling in their kit. But he has very, very good bully potential early on. Again, like I keep saying with that W Airy, I'm sure you all have played against before. It's absolutely obnoxious, the trading potential that has early on with the heal on top of it. It's very, very difficult to trade versus that. So yeah, he's pretty good. I could see him being classified as S, but again, I'm putting him down just because it's a little bit more like, if you don't dominate early, then he's going to fall off compared to some of these other champs. And he doesn't have the engage, right? Like some of these other, like Janna and Sona don't have great engages either, but they just scale harder. Okay, then we've got Lulu. Lulu's an interesting case because I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker. Lulu's an interesting case because she has a pretty low win rate for an enchanter. She almost always does, but yet she sees the highest pro play of almost any enchanter. And people, a lot of high-level players complain about her and say she's really OP. And a couple of things there. Number one, she's very good with certain kinds of champs. So she's very matchup dependent on your side. More so than many of the other enchanters. And what I mean by that is you really have to have a champion that scales very hard off of attack speed. And can really leverage the fact that your W, your Whimsy, gives a lot of movement speed, attack speed, and then your E, or I guess not necessarily your E, but your Pix, your passive, does like 80 on attack damage. So you want champions that are going to be attacking a lot so you get more use out of picks. So that's the main thing with Lulu, is you want her with things like Kog'Maw or Jinx or Twitch. Just things that, do what I was talking about. Lots of attack speed, preferably lots of other on-hit interactions. And then she loves to get Ardent Sensor for that reason as well. So Ardent did get buffed. That's very nice for her. She doesn't use Helia very well, because she only has one shield on a pretty long cooldown with her E, and she doesn't trigger Font that well. I mean, your Q can trigger Font. I guess your R can trigger it too, so... But you don't have a lot of, damage things either. You can, auto-attack some, I guess, but she's not amazing with Helia compared to some of the other champions, but she's still, pretty decent. Your R is also a lot better in the early game, so you kind of, she does scale pretty well late game, but your R doesn't scale very well with plus healing and shielding. It's not cut by grievous wounds, but it also doesn't scale particularly well. And you're very all in on your auto attacker doing well, right? So if you're playing in a game, you pick her with Kog'Maw, and your Kog'Maw goes 0-5 in lane, and you guys just constantly keep getting dove, or he's out of position and dies, you can't do a lot, because you can't engage that well, and the types of buffs that you're giving out don't work as well with non-attack speed champs out there, right? Versus someone like Janna can still do pretty well. You want your ADC to do well, but the fact that you get bonus plus healing and shielding off of your E is good for anybody, right? Even if you have a mage fed on your team, you can protect the mage better because you're getting more plus healing and shielding. Or if you have a Zed on your team, or, just some kind of lethality user, right? The fact that she gives flat AD on her E means that you can help them out with their abilities and their burst damage and things like that. So, Something like Janna or Sona, I feel, are just going to be a lot more versatile than Lulu, versus Lulu is highly specialized. Like, yo, we're banking on this ADC not being bad. And if they're good, it's just like lights out. So she's just a lot more extreme. Other potential problems with her is she's very short range. A lot of people don't appreciate that, but like her shield is 650 versus Janna's like 800. And that can get you into trouble a lot of times. That's going to open you up to getting, attacked by divers a lot more often. You also have choices on Lulu, so you have to choose: do you do damage to the enemy with your E, or do you shield an ally? And most importantly, with your W, do you polymorph the enemy to CC him, which is extremely powerful. Like a 2+ seconds of CC is incredibly good. But if you do that, then you don't have the steroid for your ADC anymore. You don't give them the attack speed and the movement speed. So that's a really hard choice, and you have to actually click it correctly. I know that sounds stupid, but if you've ever played Lulu, you can misclick very easily in a team fight. If there's like a Zed right on top of your ADC, and you try to polymorph the Zed, and you accidentally whimsy your ADC, then they're going to die. So I know that's like, get good, learn how to click, but seriously, if their frames are overlapping on each other, like there's nothing you can do. You just click on it, and it's like whoever it targets is whoever it targets. I think there's like a hotkey you can press. It's like target enemies only, enemy champions only. But it's like, I don't know if that would stop this, because it's such a weird interaction. There might be other champs in the game, but there certainly aren't many. Not any are coming to mind, where you have an ability that can affect either an enemy or an ally, and they do very different things. There aren't that many abilities like that. So that's low key. Like, it doesn't seem like she has a lot of mechanics, but she kind of does. In team fights, not a lot, but it's definitely misclicks are going to happen if you play Lulu. Or if you're trying to shield an ally who's about to get blown up by something and there's an enemy there, or they're standing in a pack of minions, or they're standing on top of Dragon or Baron, and you try to click shield them on the screen, then... and you accidentally damage the other person and don't shield your ally and they die, that's bad too. Now, you can kind of work around that one by... clicking on the frame of the person, right, in the bottom right above the mini-map. So you can kind of work around that one. But the polymorph thing, I mean, you have to target the enemy, right? You can't target like the enemy's frame or whatever. Like, there's no boxes with the enemy on it, I don't believe. So you have to just try to click on them. And if the frames are overlapping, it just might go to the wrong person. So... anyways, Lulu, very good, but also very situational and a little bit more risky than some of the other ones. Last couple of champs, I know we're over an hour, and I don't want to go too far, but I do want to mention a few more. Nami is pretty good. I thought that Nami was going to be S tier, honestly. I was talking about this on the patch, because it seems like Helia would just work so well with her kit, especially her E, applying that slow. I thought that would trigger Font, and then off of the Font, that would trigger Helia a lot. So I figured you'd get a lot of power off of Nami with her E, and then she could also get Mandate on top of that. Because historically, like, Nami's very good with Mandate at one item, but then she just didn't have a phenomenal second item you could get with her. But now you do. You can go Helia and Mandate. And maybe I should try her again. I mean, I didn't have a great game on her. I missed quite a few bubbles. She felt okay. I mean, obviously with Lucian, it's going to be good. And Lucian is pretty good, like we saw earlier. So... I don't know. Nami's one where I haven't played against it a lot. I imagine it could be really good. So I could see an argument for Nami being S, especially with Lucian. I mean, Lulu could also be S if it's like Lulu with Kog'Maw or Lulu with Jinx. That's like a pretty decent player. Yes, for sure S. But again, it's just a little riskier. Nami is squishy. She does have a harder time with vision, but she can oppress early. She is very good with those types of champs. That do kind of that early game bully style play. Okay, and then Blitzcrank, not a lot new here. I mean, Blitz is not really item dependent at all. It's just like you just hit your hook or you don't, and then you just get whatever the good tank items are. So he's okay, but there are a lot of immobile champions, and I will say fewer people are getting Gale Force. A lot of people are opting in because now it competes with Infinity Edge. So, because they're both mythics now. So a lot of people are going for like the Storm Razor Infinity Edge type of builds, and that means they're not going to have that dash to get away from Blitzcrank potentially. Or even if they do build Gale Force, now you can at least think, all right, well, I made them build Gale and not build Infinity Edge, so that's going to, lower their overall damage output. It's like paying the Blitzcrank tax, right? It's like having to buy a QSS almost against Malzahar or something. It's not quite that extreme, but it puts Blitz in a pretty good position that they changed the itemization to where Gale Force has a much higher opportunity cost now. So, yeah, a lot of these top-end champs going to be squishy, Blitz, and a lot of these enchanters also very squishy, very vulnerable. I mean, all of these are pretty bad against Blitzcrank, except for Rakan. Rakan's good against him. Personally, like, Rakan can dodge the hook, but if Blitz hooks your ADC, Rakan is not getting him out of that. I mean, most champs aren't. But Rakan's not going to be able to save them either. So, that's interesting. And Amumu, I wasn't really sure where to put him. I didn't see anyone trying out Helia on Amumu. Maybe you're just too squishy with it. But I thought it'd be really strong with his W because it's, basically burn damage that I would imagine would keep proccing Helia. And then you could use Font, comfortably with him with Aftershock. So I'm not really sure. He does have a good win rate though. But I do think that getting Even Shroud plus Abyssal Mask would be a really good combination on him potentially. And I don't see a lot of people doing that. A lot of people are still doing Demonic. It depends on the matchup, but I think Abyssal could potentially be a lot more useful. So, I don't know. That might be ambitious to put him up there. But with him getting more and more value out of his passive now that more champions are doing magic damage, including ADCs, then and the fact that Abyssal is a lot better to kind of double down on that, I think there are going to be more spaces where he could be pretty good. And his win rate's okay right now. It's like 52%, I think. So I might prefer him over Leona or Nautilus, but just because I think the itemization is going to be better. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe those champs are better. So I wouldn't argue if people wanted to put Amumu down in a B tier. Okay, last few. Yumi, I think, can be pretty good. She's a lot more all-in on the ADC having a brain than she has been in the past. I don't think she's particularly awesome with some of these new items like Helia and stuff like that. She can't abuse it as much as other champs. She has a slightly lower win rate, but it's still pretty good. It's 51, 52%. Same old Yumi, untargetable, great. If people were popping off, gives nice benefits, but absolutely atrocious. Probably up there in terms of worst supports in the game for vision control because she's not going to buy boots. Super squishy. It's just vision control with Yumi is a meme. So you're just not going to have any, and that's one of the most powerful things that support is vision control. I'm really huge on it. So I can't really put her over tier 3 just because of how bad her vision control is, unless her stats are just absolutely stupid OP, and I just don't think they are right now. Like, they're good, but I just don't think they're good enough to warrant putting her up there with some of these other champs that have a little bit of better vision control and also scale. So, still pretty good. Not a lot new going on there. Pyke is pretty good. Now, I haven't tried him out a ton. I've heard Ghostblade is really OP right now. I haven't tried Ghostblade on Pyke, but it seems like it could be good. Kind of like Blitzcrank, if you hit that hook with Pyke pretty consistently, you're probably going to be able to get kills. Pyke is pretty nice, too, because he does have a lot of escapes and lots of different gank angles. You can go invisible and run around stuff. They did nerf Umbral quite a bit a while ago, so it's a little bit harder to clear vision than it used to be. But he's still going to be pretty good in the right kinds of situations. He does not have as much CC as some of the other tanks, but he can potentially snowball. So kind of like Lulu, he's just really volatile. In the right situation, he feels OP, but in other situations, he can feel kind of worthless. Okay. And then... sorry, got an ant there. Leona and Nautilus, I'll just cover those together. I mean, not a lot has changed there. You do have, some of your tank items are going to be a little bit better. Locket, Knight's Vow, Zeke's, all these got some pretty good buffs. but he's just going to get outscaled so hard compared to some of these enchanters right now, these Helia enchanters. And you're just going to get poked out. Like, it's going to be really rough. And you're not going to get as many ganks, probably. It's a lot harder to gank because Sweeper is a lot worse, and Vision's just going to stay up longer. So it's going to be a lot harder to get priority in the lane. So there's going to be a lot of matchups where you're just going to be pushed in, by Jin Sona or something, and it's just going to be really hard to find plays, and you're just going to be sitting under tower getting poked out. Now, obviously, later on in the game, you can find good gank angles, and if you do get ganks from the jungler, you can get some good angles there, but I feel like it is a little bit rougher at most levels of play for Leona and Nautilus than it was before. You can still do it, but it is a little rougher, versus, again, what makes them different from Rakan is Rakan has sustain to deal with that poke a little bit more, and Rakan does scale better. He doesn't scale as well as Janna and Sona, but he can at least kind of keep up and kind of do some stuff, later on in the game, because he does have the shields, and he can get some of those enchanter items like Helia. If he wanted to, he could get Ardent Censer, Staff of Flowing Water. So they just don't have as many options for that. They really have to capitalize and snowball early on. And then Senna, I could see Senna. I know Mr. Origami really is a fan of Senna, but she is quite good right now, to be honest. Like, I could see her being tier 2. I haven't tried all of her sort of different builds out. I don't know if something like Ghostblade would be good on her, but she does fit really well into that theme of that push, poke, but also has pretty good utility. She can be vulnerable to ganks depending on the type of gank. She can go untargetable with her E. So if it's something that requires a target, she can be good against that. But if it's something that's just like running at you, she might struggle with that a little bit. So I don't know. We could try Senna out a little bit more. I think she could be good in the right kind of comp, but she's still, going to be squishy, going to be exploitable late game, especially if you don't get ahead early. And then Thresh is okay if you're landing your hooks. I don't think the itemization favors him particularly well right now. It's really hard for him to get to the back line. So if you have some of these ADCs that are just like turbo popping off, like a Kog'Maw or something, it's really, really difficult to deal with that. And I just think you're going to get outscaled. But if you do, and he's going to get poked out, kind of like Leona, Nautilus, stuff like that. If you do land some hooks early, that's great. But if they're just like turbo clearing the wave, and you're just kind of hanging out under your tower, just eating Caitlyn Qs or Gen grenades or whatever, it's going to be really tough. So I think it's just hard for him to get back in the game if he falls behind to these, double range matchups, which are going to be very, very common in the bottom lane. Very, very bad matchup, I feel like, into Janna. I don't know. Like, if he lands hooks on her, you can do it, but, like, his damage profile is so low, I feel like, compared to something like a Blitzcrank early on, that it feels like Janna's probably going to be able to just peel out of most of those situations. So, I don't know. Sona's okay. She can pressure. She does scale. She doesn't do as well with Helia as some of the others. I think she's okay. She really probably is one of the only Moonstone users, but I just feel like it's not as good as Helia is. She's alright. I would just probably rather be playing Sona. I think that Sona just has better itemization options and more reliable poke. But, okay. Well, that's going to be it. I already know I went over an hour. I don't want to do too much on this, but thank y'all very much for tuning in. I think it's shaping up to be a pretty good meta. Again, I know some people are complaining, but I think it's pretty good. Some people just don't like change. They're like, I figured out the game. I don't want new stuff. But I think that one of the best things about League is that it constantly is updating. So for a game that's been around for realistically 13 years, right, since 2010 was really when Season 1 started, that's pretty damn good with how it can still feel fresh for a lot of people, and how some of these old guns are still playing the game. I've been playing since 2011. I still think it's exciting. I still enjoy the game a lot. And a lot of it is because it constantly gets updates. Now, sometimes people complain because it doesn't get enough updates. It's been the same meta for too long. And then sometimes people complain if it's changing too much. People just like to complain, right? But I think overall, it's great for a game that can constantly update and find ways to maintain its core identity, but still feel fresh and exciting and give people new ways to explore and new things to try out. And I think League does that better than almost anybody else in the market right now. It's still around after 13 years. I know people have been saying it's dying for like 10 years now, but other games come and go, right? Fortnite, all these other popular games show up and they're around and they're interesting for a while, but no one just does it like old Trusty sometimes. And I think switching it up and adding some fresh stuff for people to explore is the key to that. And I think that they've done a really good job of it on this patch. But anyways, that's it. Thanks. Have a good day, and we'll see you by next time.